Chapter 2. Interpreter's House. Nothing happened until Christian had knocked and called out several times. Then a voice asked, "Who are you? Where are you from? What do you want?" The pilgrim replied, "I am a burdened sinner, on my way to Mount Zion from the city of destruction, and I want to know whether you will let me in." "To save you from Beelzebub's sharp arrows," answered Goodwill. "Come in." With these welcoming words, the gate was opened, and to Christian's surprise, a hand jerked him over the threshold. Face to face with Goodwill, the gatekeeper, he demanded, "Why did you pull me in like that?" His grim castle stands close by, and his soldiers aim their arrows at pilgrims who approach the gate, hoping to kill them before they are admitted. Then the gatekeeper questioned Christian about the people and dangers he had encountered. When the pilgrim had given an account of his adventures, Goodwill pointed ahead, saying, "Do you see that narrow way? It's the path you must now take, a route pioneered by the prophets, Christ and his apostles, a straight and narrow way." Christian studied the path ahead. "Are there no turnings or bends?" he asked. "There are many byways," Goodwill replied, "but all of them are wide and crooked, so you will know they are not to be followed." Ever conscious of the weight on his back, Christian asked, "Can you not help me be rid of my burden?" "You must bear it a little longer," Goodwill told him. Then he directed the pilgrim to Interpreter's house, adding the instruction, "Go up to the door and knock." After knocking several times, Christian was admitted and welcomed by Interpreter. Following a man with a lighted candle, the pilgrim and his host went into a room. The light bearer opened a door. Christian's eyes were immediately attracted to a picture hanging on the wall behind it. This depicted a figure with a book in his hands, a crown over his head, and the world behind his back. The figure was that of a man, but such a man as Christian had never seen before. He was perfect in human shape. Love emanated from his eyes. Truth was imprinted on his lips. Eternal wisdom and innocence radiated from his face. "What does this picture mean?" asked Christian, awed. "The person it depicts is unique," Interpreter replied. "He offers light and truth to sinners. He forsook the world for the love of God and for the joys ahead. He is the only one who can guide you through the difficult places on your route." Deeply moved, Christian followed his guide into a dusty room. At Interpreter's command, a man began to sweep the floor vigorously. But the only result in his efforts was to envelop himself and the bystanders in a cloud of dust. "Do you understand?" Interpreter asked, and then explained. "This room is like the sinner's life. The dust, his sin, and the man who sweeps the floor, the law. The sweeper stirs up the dust but cannot sweep it away. Similarly, the law makes a sinner more aware of his wrongdoings, but it cannot help him be free of them." Next, Interpreter asked a girl standing nearby to bring some water. She obeyed and then sprinkled the water all over the room. When the dust had settled, it was easy for the floor to be swept clean. "The good news of the Savior is like that water," Interpreter replied. "Those who receive it are made clean and ready for the presence of the King." Christian was then taken into another room to watch two children. One, named Patience, was calm and contented. The other, Passion, could not conceal his restlessness and impatience. A bag was brought in, and its contents, a hoard of glittering treasures, emptied near Passion, who seized the bright jewels in frenzied pleasure, laughing at empty-handed Patience. But the scene soon changed, revealing a much altered Passion. He had squandered all his treasures, and he now stood clothed in nothing but rags and sunk in gloom. Patience, however, still sat in an attitude of calm hope. Passion is like the person who wants to have his fill of pleasure while he lives on earth, said Interpreter. Patience is like the traveller to Zion, who turns his back on worldly pleasures and waits with patience for the unfading joys of heaven. Determined to remember the example of patience, Christian then followed Interpreter to a wall, against which a fire blazed higher and hotter every moment, although a man stood nearby throwing water over the flames. As he watched, the pilgrim understood why. Hidden by the wall, another man was feeding the flames with oil. The fire is like God's work in people's lives, expounded Interpreter. The devil, represented by the man with water, wants to quench it, but he cannot. For Christ, the other man, keeps feeding the flame of new life with the oil of his love and kindness. Christian tried to fix the details of this encouraging scene in his mind. Then Interpreter showed Christian a castle. The pilgrim was delighted by its grandeur and beauty. He longed to be among the gold-clad figures walking along its battlements. But the door into the castle was guarded by armed men, whose presence discouraged those who wanted to enter from doing so. In the courtyard, a scribe sat at a table, writing down in a book the names of the people who filed slowly past him. As Christian surveyed this scene, he noticed a man whose uncowed bearing marked him out from the rest. Walking boldly up to the table, this man said firmly, "Write down my name, sir." As soon as the scribe had done so, the man put on his helmet, drew his sword, and rushed at the armed guard, laying about him with such strength and determination that in spite of receiving many wounds, he managed to cut his way right into the castle. Come in, eternal glory you will win," sang the gold-clad figures on the battlements as the victor entered and was given his own gold robe. This happy sight made Christian long to be on his way again. But Interpreter said, "I have more to show you, come." He led the pilgrim into a dark room in which stood an iron cage. Christian noticed with horror its pitiful occupant, a man sitting in an attitude of despair, eyes downcast and hands folded, occasionally letting out heartbreaking sighs. "Who are you?" Christian asked him. The man, whose name was Backslider, answered, "I am not the person I once was." "Who was that?" "A wise and happy believer, bound for the celestial city," was the reply. "And what are you now?" "A man imprisoned by despair, shut up forever in this cage." "How did you get into the cage?" "I failed to keep guard against the evil one, took my pleasures where and when I wished," the wretched prisoner answered. "I sinned against God and his Spirit. Now God has left me and the devil has come in his place." Christian was filled with pity for the speaker. The Son of the King is merciful, he pointed out, but nothing could penetrate Backslider's despair. "I am shut up in this cage with the terror of coming judgment as my companion," he intoned. "Let this man's misery be a warning to you," said Interpreter, as he and Christian walked away. "God, keep me always on my guard," Pilgrim prayed. By now Christian was longing to be on his way, but his guide had one more object lesson for him. Taking him into another room, he showed Christian a man rising from bed and beginning to dress. By name Unready, the man was in a state of terror. "Why does he tremble so?" Christian asked. Prompted by Interpreter, Unready answered the pilgrim's question. "Last night I had a dream in which I saw the sky grow dark with fast scudding clouds. Thunder boomed and jagged lightning streaked across the blackness. In my fear I looked upwards and saw framed in fire thousands of angels, all attending a man who sat upon a cloud. After a trumpet's blare, a voice boomed, "Arise, you dead, and come to judgment." At once, rocks split and graves opened, releasing the dead. Some advanced with joy shining from their upturned faces, but the rest slunk off to hide themselves in rocks and holes. Then, opening a book, the man proceeded to judge the world. Again a voice rang out, addressing the angel attendants, "Burn the chaff." Immediately at my feet there gaped a bottomless pit with burning coals, smoke and horrendous fire erupting. The next command resounded, "Gather the wheat into the barn." At these words, many people were caught up and carried into the clouds. I was not among them. Left behind, I tried to hide. But everywhere I went, the eyes of that man followed me. Then I woke up. "Why were you so afraid of this dream?" Christian inquired. And Reddy answered with a shudder, "Because I thought the day of judgment had already come, and I had been unprepared for it. As hell gaped at my feet, and that man's eyes looked at me, I remembered my sins, and their guilt was more than I could bear." After this sight, Interpreter asked Christian whether he had considered all that he had seen and heard. "Yes, each lesson has been either an encouragement or a warning to me," Pilgrim replied. "Let the memory of all you have experienced here spur you on," his guide exhorted him. Leaving Interpreter's house, Christian, thoughtful but eager, continued along the straight and narrow way.